Welcome, everybody, to the Legal Tech Week live roundtable of journalists and bloggers for July 29th, 2022, where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation. And lots to talk about today because we weren't here last week, and lots happened since then. I am Bob Ambrogi. I have the blog Law Sites, the podcast Law Next, and the world famous Law Next legal technology directory that Gene does not write for. And but Gene, you write for something.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm Gene O'Grady. I write the Dewey v. Strategic blog, which covers research, information, knowledge management, workflow, and anything else I'm interested in, and also Legal Tech Hub. That's all.
Okay. And Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal covering business of law and technology.
And Niki.
Well, I am Niki Black. I am the legal technology evangelist with my case, Law Practice Management Software. I write legal technology columns for the ABA Journal, Above the Law, the New York Daily Record. I think it's actually called the Rochester Daily Record now. And I also sometimes write for the My Case blog, and I also create some industry reports and benchmark reports for my case as well. And happy that we're back together this week.
Yeah. Where's your lovely porch view? Looking out over
I'm sitting inside right now because I had a meeting right before this and I didn't have time to really switch into like Friday afternoon mode. So I'm inside.
Right.
I was hoping we'd see the butterfly again.
The attack butterfly. That thing's brutal.
Yeah. And well, Steve, introduce yourself.
Sure. Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads, which is generally about all the things that Jean's blog is about, only she does it much better. But I'm happy to be back and went to AALL, and as far as I know, did not get COVID, but did catch a cold.
That
Go
happens.
figure.
That still happens too. Joe, Patrice.
Yeah, Joe Patrice from Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast. I am, glad to be back. I did not get to go to AALL next year. Hopefully I'll pull that one off. But yeah, I'm rested and ready to talk about some legal tech.
Good. And last but not least, Zach Warren.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Zach Warren. I'm currently the editor-in-chief of ALM's Legal Tech News. Also see me on law.com and some other ALM brands as I'm getting a few cocked heads because that's only the case for the next week. But yeah, currently the editor-in-chief of ALM's Legal Tech News.
Yes, it's true. We've driven Zach away. He's going to he's leaving his position and therefore leaving this panel. But you'll be here next week, right?
I will be here next week. Yeah, my final day at ALM and like one of my final couple hours at ALM, I will spend with y'all and probably have a drink in my hands.
Well, how else would you want to spend your final couple of hours at ALM?
Yeah, hey, it works by me.
So I think it's going to be mandatory that everybody in the audience and the panel brings has a glass of champagne at the handy next week so we can toast Zach off on his new venture. And will you be able to tell us next week what that new venture is? Or you're still
yeah, probably. It's not a huge secret, but for ALM's sake, yeah, I'll wait till next week.
Sounds good. All right. Well, as several people said, a bunch of us, four of us to be exact, were at the first in-person annual conference of the American Association of Law Libraries since COVID hit. That was in Denver last week. Zach was there, Steve was there, Gene, of course, was there, and I was there. We missed Joe and Victor and Niki, but I know both Zach and Steve have written about their impressions of it. I've written a couple of articles that came out of it, but I haven't actually written up my impressions. I don't know if you did either, Gene. Did you write your impressions?
I didn't. I guess it didn't occur to me until I saw the other articles. And I thought, that's a good idea. I should have done that.
Yeah, exactly. I just haven't had time. It's like the news keeps happening even after you get back. But yeah, I don't know. What did people think? What were your takeaway?
Well, I think Steve, who was it who said COVID was the big presenter at? That was like the dark cloud over everything. And as it went on, you saw more and more masks and more people dropping out. Although I think everybody was happy to be there. And it's funny, I was talking to a vendor this morning and he said they had the best attendance, or they had more traffic and more great leads from this conference than any before the pandemic. So at least one vendor came away really happy.
Yeah, I touched a little bit about the COVID stuff in my takeaways article. I mean, you could definitely tell that it was kind of a pervasive theme because, to the credit of people there were a ton of people in masks, which, including the speakers a lot of times, which I think I wrote in my piece may come from the fact that it was more of a law school educational crowd that may take that stuff a little bit more seriously. But I think it was 4 of the 5 panels that I was in had a last minute call out, which of course they didn't say what the call out was for, but you could kind of read between the lines. All in all, though, I thought it was a great show. The panels that I sat in on were extremely interesting. I got a ton of story ideas out of them, and it's a perspective that you don't necessarily get at a lot of trade shows, since a lot of the panels tended to be based on academic papers or research that somebody had done, or a data project coming out of a law school, which I really appreciated and kind of approaches legal tech from a slightly different way than perhaps I'm used to.
Yeah, I thought one of the great quotes that I just stumbled upon was from Greg Lambert. I bumped into him on the exhibit floor after the keynote, and we were talking about the difference, sort of the different mindset of people that attend AALL. And he said, well, most of these people are users and doers of technology, and they look at things a little bit differently, have different interests, not heavy duty into sales or not heavy duty into purchasing so much. And so it was kind of a refreshing thing. Although I had, I guess, a little bit of the opposite reaction. I was surprised at the sort of lack of masking in the public areas anyway. On the exhibit floor, I saw very few people in masks. Certainly at the parties, it was, of course, where everybody's eating and drinking, it's kind of hard to wear a mask, but it was a little unnerving for me to be in some of those rooms with, hundreds of people, in close proximity. And that didn't deter me from going. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I had not been in that kind of situation for a long time, and it gave me some pause, I guess.
That's fair. I think I'm grading somewhat on a curve too, because I'm comparing to like a Legal Week or a Clock or something like that, which did not have as many as I think you saw at AALL.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was a great show. I agree with you, Zach. I mean, I enjoyed it. A lot of good discussions, a lot of smart people, and it was good. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought the mask thing was kind of strange, only because I myself even kept going back and forth. I would like put it on as I walked into the exhibit hall, and then 5 minutes later I'm talking to somebody and I just feel like, or I'm drinking coffee, or and it just lose it, and then I forgot to put it back on. But we know some people got COVID as a result of the conference, because they tweeted about it, and I talked to at least one of the vendors who was there who got COVID there, but it doesn't sound like it was a major hotspot for COVID infections. So sorry, Gina, I cut you off. Yeah.
I got 2 alerts when I got home from the Colorado Department of Health, saying I had been with somebody who came down with it, but so far I haven't come down with it. The other thing I was going to say, just in terms of what was sort of surprising, was the total absence of big launches. And, Thomson Reuters and Wolters Kluwer did have a couple of smaller add-on interesting things. Fast Case was showing their citator. Thomson Reuters was just, they sort of cracked me up. They're like the Sphinx. Like, we don't need to say anything. We're Thomson Reuters. We don't need a launch. We're Thomson Reuters.
Yeah. Well, they don't have a PR department anymore either. So.
Yeah. Well, that's true too.
That was exactly what I was about to jump in and say. Good job.
We don't need to compete. We've already arrived. We don't need to compete with new products.
Yeah. I mean, if listeners don't know, they've laid off much of their, it was a layoff per se, but they've cut back much of their
There's
PR
one guy
staff. They
left.
traditionally, yeah,
There's
one guy
one guy left,
standing
and I
right
met with
now.
him.
Yeah, yeah. So
Although, I did notice that Bloomberg and Walters Kluwer and Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis, they had huge floor space. It seemed bigger than what I remembered, but maybe it really wasn't. But it sure seemed like they were occupying a lot of things and giving away stuff, and it did not seem to me to be as many of the sort of smaller startup kind of sort of startups that we've seen in the past, but that could just be a sort of an impression. I could be wrong about that.
I think you're right. And I think one of the complaints, having been on the AALL board, is that getting a booth there is fairly expensive, and that is hard. And Bob and I think have both talked to AALL about having something like a startup alley where there's a way for smaller companies to get in there without paying the full freight. So I do think it is perhaps too much, because I have met lots of vendors, startups, mostly walking around the halls
Right.
before they can afford one, which I think is a shame. I think there should be more room or a way for them to be able to exhibit. The other thing I noticed was the complete absence of handouts. Like, everyone has gone digital, and I think I know it's ridiculous, but I always liked walking away with a brochure, and almost nobody had any paper to hand you,
yeah, which I would then pile up on my credenza somewhere and throw away after 6 months when I never looked at them again.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point, Gene, about some kind of startup alley. That they do that at the Consumer Electronics Show every year,
Yeah.
and it is one of the most. It's one of the things I really enjoy going through, because some of it's bizarre, some of it is ridiculous, some of it you think that could work, but it's in this huge basement downstairs, and they're all kind of crammed in there, and it is interesting, and I'm sure they give them a discount to be in there.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of the more interesting things to go to, I think.
Yeah.
The thing that came closest is, they have those Cool Tools Cafe, which tends to be mostly academics, but they show off these really niche-y little products, like how to do videos, and I don't know, a lot of it's geared towards training and time management. I thought there were some fun things I saw in those Cool Tools sessions.
Yeah. And I mean, there were some announcements that came out of there. I don't know, none of them were maybe spectacular, but I think all three of you, Zach, Steve, and Gene, wrote about bits and pieces of them. I mean, there was the Lexus announcement, and Walters Kluwer had, I think, I forget which of you said it was kind of some smaller news, but some interesting stuff that they announced there. But yeah, not like the old days of going there. I mean, we've talked about this before with other shows too. It's the timing of announcements to trade shows seems to be waning. That used to be a thing for Legal Week. It used to be a thing for Tech Show, certainly for this show, and now people are spacing them out more. And to me, that's smart. I think the trouble with timing, when everybody was announcing their big news at the same show, right, they ended up losing attention rather than gaining attention, because they're just one of many products in the spotlight.
Yeah, right. If I could play devil's advocate to that, though, I'm even thinking just back to the last AALL, where Bloomberg Law had their huge release that I know they rented out a whole space for, and they had actual kiosks there that you could be hands-on and play with the tool a little bit. I think there is something to be said.
Speakeasy, no less. I love it.
Yeah, the speakeasy.
What city was that?
That was
in DC. Yeah.
DC. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm a stranger to that.
Fair. I do think there's something to be said, though, of if you're going to be releasing something, and especially if you want people to be hands-on, if you want a large number of people in one place to be able to give demos, doing it at a conference is just an easy way to get a bunch of faces in front of your product.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of those product announcements that were made there, and anything jump out at people as particularly interesting?
Well, I wrote about the Lexus fact identifier, like one more technology that helps associates not read, which worries me. So, I mean, I understand what they're doing, and of course they claim that it was completely unique, but I actually think it had some similarities to, what is it, the case text compose. I think case text does that kind of precision fact related precedent searching. So I mean, I think it's a good product, but I always worry as somebody who has to teach associates how to do research. I'm always afraid they're going to forget they actually have to go and read the cases themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a little bit on the LexisNexis thing too, which was not I didn't get the sense it was a huge new deal. It was kind of a refinement of some of the things that they got, but they seem to be sort of committed to trying to make their products easy for people to use and not clunky like a lot of the legal tech was over the years. So it's a noble effort. I don't know if they will succeed. The other thing I thought was interesting is they told me that they have basically given up trying to teach lawyers how to have good workflows and processes, and so their goal now is to automate that so that the lawyers don't have to do it, because after all, they're all special snowflakes and think the way they do work is the only way, which, I mean, I'm not sure if LexisNexis has succeeded with that, but I think they're right. I mean, after years and years and years of trying to get lawyers to use good workflows that make sense, I don't think they're ever gonna succeed. So throw in the towel and forget it.
Yeah, I met with LexisNexis, but was actually more interested in talking to them about that Decisis legal research service that we've talked about before on this show. But they had kind of stealthily launched this legal research service, or their parent company had stealthily launched this legal research service. And at the time I first wrote about it, Jeff Pfeiffer, who's a Lexis chief product officer at Lexis, didn't get back to me, and it turns out he was on vacation. It wasn't like he was avoiding me, but I finally got a chance to sit down with Jeff and talk about it. And they kind of said, well, we weren't really trying to be stealthy about it. It's just that we just really wanted to draw a clear distinction between a LexisNexis legal research product and this Decisis legal research product, which is not as robust, and we don't want to make anybody think it's as robust as the LexisNexis research product. But I mean, he did certainly confirm that they are really going after the fast case market effectively.
Yes.
Here with this. I mean, this is to compete against fast case for bar association businesses.
That's
business.
big news.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating.
I think the big news is that fast case has become such a threat that they're finding specific products to go after bar by bar. The bars that they all 50, is it more than 50? The bars that they have under their wing.
Yeah, because they have state and local and they have Virgin Islands territory. So yeah, but fast case, acquired Casemaker. They were always sort of competing against each other, and then last year or 2 years ago, I guess it was now, fast case acquired Casemaker and pretty much sewed up the entire bar market for itself. And Pfeiffer said that LexisNexis or RELX had been thinking about this before, had been working on this before the fast case Casemaker acquisition, but who knows? Anyway, that was interesting. All right, well, maybe we ought to let our other panelists who have been sitting here patiently talk as we talk about something that they weren't at weigh in. And who wants to go first? Joe, you want to? You've been very quiet so far.
Yeah, I mean, sure. So this one's actually a story that I think I know, Bob, you've written about it. I don't know if others people got in it too. So the Wall Street Journal is having a really bad month because they've been getting taken to task a lot, and now they might get sued for defamation because they put out a story talking about Elon Musk having an affair with Sergey Brin's wife, and the lawyers say that's not true, and we are taking the position that this is defamatory. So fun times over there. But the angle for that is, and I didn't even realize this until Bob, you said it. This has a legal tech angle because the woman at the center of all this is an old legal tech CEO.
A former one. He's not very
Yeah.
old. He's only about 30.
Good point. By old, I mean former. Former. That version of old. Yeah. No. Which I feel like all of us. Maybe there's not a lot of tech to this story, but I feel like if any of the people on this call are like me, you enter your life with people who are not in legal tech, and you say something about cool things happening in legal tech, and they roll their eyes at you and laugh at you, and it's like, no, legal tech is in the real news now. Like now we get to feel cool for a while because we know a little bit of something about a real news story.
Right.
It's exciting for us.
It's every so often you cross the chasm, right, from just this insular legal tech world into the broader universe, and it feels like you're going through some kind of a space-time warp or something when it happens. But yeah, she had been the founder of a company called Clear Access IP, which was a kind of a patent management platform, and she had raised some money in that, and she'd gotten acquired, but she's also a Codex fellow, and I think she's still a Codex fellow. And I had actually included her in a post I did back in 2017 on the women of legal tech, and so that was kind of interesting. I kept reading. It's funny because I kept reading the news and I kept thinking that name sounds so familiar, and then I finally searched my own site. I'm like, oh wow.
So buck up, everybody. All of you in legal tech, you too can someday sue the Wall Street Journal for defamation, I'm sure, if you just stick with it long enough.
The badge of legal tech success, or at least get into some kind of a fisticuffs with Elon Musk. Yeah.
In my write-up, I had to clarify for, because I write for mostly a legal audience, but occasionally non-legal folks, that the defamation here is the allegation that she was cheating on her husband and that's what harms her reputation, not that she would have had sex with Elon Musk, which, while that may be defamation per se.
Well, they're both kind of related. They're both kind of related,
Yeah, like the actionable harm is probably allegations of cheating, not that it was Elon. But I mean, I don't know. Are we sure that those aren't grounds? We'll see.
Well, and notably, not only has Elon Musk and Nicole Shanahan now denied that there was ever any affair, but Musk had to go on to tweet the fact that, in fact, he hasn't even had sex in a long time. Which we didn't need him to share.
Right.
Somebody really just needs to take his Twitter account away from him for even like a week. I think it would do everybody some good, most of all him.
Well, yeah, maybe he wouldn't be facing a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit right now from Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. If only he had. Well, all right. So, well, Victor, how about you? You've also sat here patiently while we've been talking about other stuff. What do you got this week?
Oh, yeah, it's just lately we've been just the journal in general, the ABA journal in general. We've been looking at how Dobbs impacts well, just everybody going forward. But like one story that we did a few weeks ago looked at tech providers and what whether women should be worried about their data being sold or possibly seized to like with all these trigger laws going into effect. And we published a story this week looking at law firms who are who have gone out of the way to help their lawyers or associates or staffers, made it clear that like they'll pay for their expenses to go to different states and whatnot to get the healthcare that they need. And so, but this particular story that I posted, that I put in the queue, was just kind of interesting. Like there's a proposed bill in South Carolina which would ban the internet from putting up information about abortions in case people wanted to look for it within the state. And it's just obviously it's one of those things where I think a lot of these bills I think are just trying to make statements or trying to score political points. But it just kind of underscores just like the uncertainty of like now that Roe's been overruled and different states have different aims and different things that they want to push and whatnot. It just kind of underscores the uncertainty for women, even for people who are just trying to make certain healthcare decisions for themselves, and it just kind of like I thought it just kind of underscores the uncertainty of all of that and sort of like what people have to be wary of going forward. So I mean, who knows if this law is even going to go into effect. I think, you know, there obviously there are constitutional issues. Obviously there are, you know, issues about whether or not they can really, you know, stop like out of state service providers from, you know, what people look at within the state from coming from out of state. But, you know, it's just one of those things that I think just kind of underscores sort of the overall uncertainty of the terrain right now.
Isn't that something we're always criticizing China for, trying to block websites? I mean, it seems like somebody needs training on what the internet does. It's designed to route you around blocks. You know?
It's a series of tubes.
No, literally though, that's what I was about to say is not only does somebody not understand what the internet is supposed to do, but they also don't understand how the internet functions in practice because like there are ways around everything with VPN and like there's going to be information like say on a Walgreens or CVS website about like reproductive health and stuff like that. So are you banning your local drugstore's internet like websites now? It seems dumb even not taking the politics of it into account just from a pure technology standpoint.
Well, I'm not surprised because they don't even understand how women's reproductive systems work. So why would they understand how the internet works? They can't even understand the bodies of the people that are legislating about, you know, they think that one of them, there was a video where he said if a woman swallows a camera, kind of like you have to for certain medical procedures, won't that just go into a reproductive tract? That wasn't the exact word that he used, but that's what he was thinking. Another one talked about how they talk about women can just shut, you know, rape down. Some of the senators have said that they can just stop the fertilization from happening. They talk about how there's so many things that they don't understand when it comes to women's reproductive tracts, and they're legislating against it. So how would they understand? I mean, how could they possibly understand a website? Like they're just not operating with a lot of knowledge or curiosity. I'm not really sure. But
I thought the South
Yes.
Carolina law was pretty outrageous, but was it South Carolina? Yeah, South Carolina.
Yeah,
but,
South Carolina.
But the point the article made also is just that so many states are now looking at creating laws around either ensuring access or blocking access to information. And you know, it reminded me of we talked recently about all the sort of patchwork of state privacy laws that's developed over the last few years, and how difficult it is for states to comply with all of those, how difficult it is for businesses to comply with all of those laws, because if you're operating, you know, anywhere other than just within a small geographic region, you basically have to comply with all the laws. And this could be like a whole new nightmare for businesses if any of these laws actually take effect, which of course does open up an opportunities for 650 to develop one of its handy create a policy that will comply with every law. They actually just launched one last week on the state privacy laws. You know, fill out one set of information and we'll complete every form you need for every state privacy law, which is kind of cool. But anyway,
one of
it's
the articles that we published earlier this week about looking at you know, what law firms are doing and whatnot. I mean, one person in the story made the point that like, well, you know, it might actually inform like how law firms determine what states to open up in now. Because if they're like, okay, well, you know, well, it going both ways, right? If they're very strongly in favor of, you know, preserving access to abortion, you know, women's right to choose and whatnot, they're not going to go to like, they're not going to open it like Mississippi. And then vice versa, if they're, you know, a very conservative firm that, you know, believes that Dobbs was the right decision and that, you know, abortion is murder, they're not going to open in, like, maybe they won't open in California or New York or Illinois. So I mean, you know, like they're obviously going to be, well, big, you know, like a lot of ramifications, and obviously, you know, people are going to push for, you know, I mean, you know, we know what's going to happen. We know what the next step is, right? I mean, you know, like people are going to push for a national ban. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, though.
well, and there's so many privacy implications, sort of aside from what you didn't mention, Bob, but you know, the one thing that really struck me about the case of that 10-year-old girl who was raped, who crossed state lines out of Ohio and Indiana to get the abortion. Indiana has pretty restrictive laws on abortion, although they don't restrict them as much as Ohio. And one of their restrictions requires the all physicians to report anybody who gets an abortion. And then when it's allegations of abuse like that, there's even an additional layer of reporting. So basically, women are, you know, it's like a scarlet A. I mean, they may not right now be required to publicly wear this, but there's issues with that. And then when you think of that slippery slope of trying to prevent people from crossing state lines or trying, you know, you can't actually, I think it was Alito that said, you can't prevent people, you know, that's not going to affect the ability to cross state lines in commerce constitutionally, but it can certainly, in reality, make it really difficult for women to cross state lines because they can, you know, have reasonable cause under their laws to question you for an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it may be, to determine whether you're crossing state lines for that reason. And that's just like a common sense application right now. When if it gets down to the nitty gritty, like how are you going to prove that that's not why a woman's crossing state lines? Are you going to do ultrasounds at the border? Are you going to do transvaginal ultrasounds? Like, do you want to detect it at like 6 weeks, at 5 weeks, at 4 weeks? Like, how are you going to prove this?
Wait, who's getting stopped at the border? Where are their barriers?
If you take the
between
slippery
states?
slope, if you take the slippery slope where they're penalizing either physicians or the women or people that are assisting the women in crossing state lines to get abortions, some of the laws already incorporate concepts like that. So when you take it the slippery slope, where how are you actually going to enforce that?
Well,
And how are you
I'll jump in and just like for an example, when various states legalized recreational marijuana, neighboring states that kept it illegal were like blanket stopping people coming into the state with foreign plates. That sort of thing hasn't started yet, but is
That was
certainly
like New York and New Jersey alcohol laws when I was a teenager.
right.
I did
Everyone came across the bridge to New York. I get it.
I did read about a case, a sort of a bizarre set of facts, but it was a woman who was from somewhere in Europe who had a work
Australia.
For some reason was Australia and was crossing.
And she was coming to Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she got
she stopped in LA and asked about a bunch of abortion questions and then sent back.
Right. And, you know, so that was just a really strange situation because none of it made a lot of sense in terms of why they had any interest in that at all at that particular border. But I mean, I think you're going to see more and more of that. So even if they're not actually preventing you in terms of from a constitutional sense, they're effectively preventing you because it, you know, that gets, and if you take that to its extreme, you end up with like women stuck in their houses in Afghanistan, not able to drive without a man with them. Like, you know, this is a slippery slope and I don't like where it's headed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go
technically
pay my
the
ACLU dues right now.
Technically, that woman, while she was questioned about whether she was trying to get an abortion, which was wild, the actual reason they flipped her back is that her deal was she was trying to go to Canada to house sit. It was basically a vacation, and she would house sit, and that was her pay. And we technically have some sort of provision that says we don't let people get visas who are going to places to work without pay, like that kind of house sit for is your only recompense, which that makes some sense. I mean, you could see people being exploited pretty easily that way, but that was the real reason she got sent back. But yeah, she got questioned a lot about abortion, which was kind of terrifying.
All right. Well, Niki, what would you like to chat about this week?
Chatbots. That was a lovely transition there. Nice segue. I wrote an article for the ABA Journal, and just by way of background, if you're not familiar with my articles, I write a weekly column that is about different types of software, the who, what, when, why of the software, basically. And this month I wrote about chatbots and online chat, basically. Oops. All right. Same time. So I wrote about chatbots for the ABA Journal and also just online chat tools for lawyers. And what I thought was particularly interesting was when I covered this a little over two and a half years ago, there were not very many that were legal specific. And now there are increasingly legal specific options that essentially make it possible for clients to get information or provide information through some sort of chat functionality on a law firm's website. And there's a significant number of standalone products now that are specifically for lawyers. And then some virtual receptionist services are also starting to include that as a feature or tool that they'll offer as part of their subscription fee. So I thought it was just really interesting. And it was just one more sign of the times in terms of how the pandemic and touchless interaction has sort of affected sort of the speeding up and provision of certain types of functionalities, and that was one of them. And so it was interesting to kind of dive in and see how much it had changed, and it was just sort of one more little piece of the puzzle in terms of what how the pandemic's going to affect things on the other side of this, if we ever get there. You know, fingers crossed. I don't know. We'll see.
It was a good roundup of them, and you know, I think it's becoming one of those sort of critical tools for law firms, because especially for certain kinds of practices. I mean, you know, if you've got a personal injury practice or something where you're doing a lot of intake, a lot of calls coming in, it's you know, people don't necessarily want to have to wait to talk to a human, or people may want to call in at you know 11 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever else it is. And chatbots can be really useful in collecting information. There's another new one I don't think it's on your list, but I'm going to write about it next week, I think. So stay tuned for that. It's got some interesting features to it that takes it a little bit farther even, but it's a good piece.
Yeah, and I
must
think
have missed that one. I thought I did a pretty good.
It's brand new. It's brand new.
Okay, all right.
No, I was just going to say too, getting back to the point, I feel like we talk about a lot how the point of legal tech in the first place is kind of to go after that low-hanging fruit, the pain points that all attorneys have. And I mean, what is more painful, especially for solo and small firms, than intake? Like the entire intake process is just kind of hell. And when I talk to a lot of people, it's like, and just give me anything to cut down on that workflow. So something like a chat bot that, even if it cuts their time by 25%, I think it's something that a lot of people would see a reason to jump on board with.
Also, I think psychologically, though, when people reach out for legal help, I mean, they're not necessarily thinking, oh, well, you know, I have an issue that I want to talk about at like midnight, but it's okay. I'll wait till 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. for this person to get back to me. I mean, they want, you know, like that's the most important thing in the world to them. They want, you know, instant, if not instant help, at least just to know that like that you know, some help is on the way, or that they're being considered, or, you know, that there's something in place to kind of help them out with their problem immediately. So I think just having a chatbot just in any kind of, especially for lawyers, like, I mean, it's getting to become a necessity, because I mean, if you're not going to answer your phone 24/7, or, you know, or have like a receptionist or who can do that, then you need something there to kind of make sure that you're not missing any potential leads.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I had essentially just covered standalone chatbots. There are some where they're incorporated into services that are provided by certain companies, but I just was focusing on the standalone, and the chatbots were two different types. One was a chatbot where there was actually a person on the other side responding, possibly staffed by a virtual receptionist service. And then the others were AI chatbots that I think are the more typical ones we often encounter on the vast majority of websites, where you have, you know, an AI tool on the backdrop, some natural language processing, answering the most typical questions, or providing them links to the typical things they're trying to seek, or else accepting information for intake purposes. So it was interesting to see how many more AI-based chatbots were starting to pop up, though, specifically for legal.
Yep. Well, let's see. Zach, you've got another story you want to talk about this week.
Yeah, sure. So my story is another big fundraising round for a legal tech company, this one being Exterro, who in the past they're always a little vague with their funding rounds. Last time they said it was more than 100 million, not saying the exact number. This time they say it's valued us at more than a billion, well, not saying the exact number, but still valued at more than a billion. It means it's something substantial. I thought it was kind of interesting for two reasons. One being them telling us pretty explicitly, yeah, we're doing this last fundraising round and then IPO is next. So another legal tech company that's looking for the IPO route. Particularly interesting on the heels of some legal tech IPOs like Disco, their price going a little bit down. So it's curious that people are still looking that route. But also kind of along that vein, how Exterro is repositioning itself, because it's long been known as an e-discovery company. And both in this fundraising round and in my conversations with them over the past year or so, they've been starting to pivot to say, no, we're not e-discovery. We are data risk management. We're GRC. We're something a little bit different that almost puts them as a competitor with like a Mitra Tech versus other e-discovery companies. So why, I mean, we've talked about before how e-discovery is not necessarily a tapped market, but if you're a big law firm, you probably have your preferred e-discovery tool at this point. So they're going for a different market, more of a corporate market, to say, hey, we're not only a discovery provider, but we can do all this other data risk stuff for you as well. So yeah, we'll see what they do with this funding from here, but I thought it was an interesting one.
Yeah, and I had the CEO on my podcast last December when he said, you know, we will be doing an IPO in 2022. And so this got interjected in between their plans for an IPO, and now he's saying 2023 for the IPO, and there wasn't going to be another funding round. But I mean, I think he kind of acknowledged when I talked to him about this latest round that the soft market was a reason for them not deciding not to do the IPO right now, and that with this further recapitalization that they can kind of get themselves into a super strong position for the IPO in 2023. So interesting that they a little bit, I think, changed their strategy on that. All right. Anything else on that? I'll talk about a story. I did a couple of things that came out of AALL, including I did post a podcast interview with the new president, and hope you check that out. But one story I thought was actually kind of a little bit offbeat and interesting this week was this study finding that judges are influenced by write-ups of cases on Wikipedia. I mean, interestingly, this was done by a team of scientists from the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, as well as from Maynooth University in Ireland. Essentially, they found two different things. One is that if there is an article about a case on Wikipedia, then that case is more likely to be cited by judges than cases for which there is no article. Also that when there is a corresponding Wikipedia article about a case, the way judges describe it tends to sound a whole lot like the Wikipedia article. They did find that this is more likely to happen in lower courts and not in appellate courts, and particularly in lower courts with heavier caseloads or busier judges. And so, you know, I guess the takeaway here is that yes, judges take shortcuts too, like we all do. You know, rather than dive into Westlaw or LexisNexis and get the full, you know, create their own analysis of a case, they're relying on Wikipedia. I mean, the authors say this also maybe raises some public policy concerns because Do we really want judges relying on Wikipedia? And what do we know about who's writing these case summaries? I mean, in this particular case, they had law students write up they actually created a series of write-ups about cases just for the purpose of this experiment and posted them to Wikipedia. But they say really this kind of maybe points to the need for a reliable or a recognized public access source of information about cases that the judges can turn to. They specifically mention what's the Supreme, I'm blanking on the name, the OEA project on the Supreme Court, and also Justia, which full disclosure is the host of my my blog, but as examples of kind of reliable sources, authoritative sources, the word they use of case law reports. But I thought that was really interesting, and who knows whether anything will ever come of it. And I should say it was Irish courts that they studied, but they said it probably holds true for any common law jurisdiction.
Well, Bob, wouldn't you also say that Thompson or the West brothers invented that? That's how Westlaw started. They were writing summaries of cases, and that's the National Reporter System, because it is also full of synopses and headnotes explaining the case. So I'm not sure it's all that novel, although it is not free. But on the other hand, the other thing I've heard about, is it not more likely to be, I'm playing the devil's advocate here, that the lawyers are the lazy ones going to Wikipedia, summarizing the cases, and then the judges lift text out of briefs and put it into their opinions? That is the process I have always heard people refer to. So anybody want to argue about that?
No, I think that could be. I mean, I think the difference between, John West writing case summaries 150 years ago or whatever it was, and now is the point they're trying to make is you don't know who's writing these case summaries. It could be somebody who doesn't know anything, with no legal training whatsoever. Right. Obviously Wikipedia has an editing process and a review process, but you wonder how often case summaries written on Wikipedia are getting reviewed through the whole, process. Write something about Elon Musk, it'll get edited, but
aren't there federal rules? I mean, I thought there were rules against citing Wikipedia, and obviously it's not being cited. We're just assuming it's being checked. So don't we have to invade judges' privacy and do keyboard strokes and find out if they're actually going to Wikipedia in the process of writing their opinions?
Well, if they're going to do that to the rest of us, why should we do that to them?
Exactly.
Good point.
Let's stop judges at the border.
At the
Wikipedia.
Yeah, I actually got into an argument with someone one time where they Wikipedia one like a case I wrote about back when I was at AALL actually, and they were like, oh, this is disinformation because it was like a line. I think it was like the LimeWire litigation, and like the Recording Industry of America was asking for like ridiculous damages based on like a certain amount per download, which was like ridiculous. And so someone was like, "Oh, that's impossible. That there's no way they could have asked for that. This article is full of disinformation, blah blah." And then I had to like email the guy and be like, "No, this is the court paper. This is the argument. This is where I got it from, and that's how it came about." So then they finally corrected it. But then it made me think like, yeah, how many other cases where they were like, oh, that can't be, and then they just kind of like try to figure it out for themselves what it said without really checking it or having any kind of stringent review process.
Yeah, Mark Lauritsen asked in the chat about, will litigators start hiring folks to edit Wikipedia articles on relevant cases? I have to wonder whether they're not already doing that myself. I mean, we already know law firms are going on to social media and trying to influence at least public opinion about cases in posting about cases they're involved in, and why not Wikipedia? I don't know.
And marketers do that with Wikipedia for their business clients, right? They go in and they try to submit like this glowing description of whatever the company or the lawyer or the whoever does. So I'd been thinking about that, but it didn't even occur to me. But litigators would hire folks to write stuff. That's a really interesting variation of that concept. So maybe they will. I mean, that's a really interesting idea. Maybe they already are.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me either. And it's also like, as somebody who was in college when Wikipedia was really coming up and starting to be outlawed as a source for things, it is very easy to just take a piece of text from Wikipedia, Google it. There's inevitably some like college website or academic website or something else that is also copied from Wikipedia, but is hosting it on a .edu address, and just say, oh, I'm going to cite that instead. So I'm not really citing Wikipedia. I'm citing the University of Houston, which also pasted from Wikipedia. So there are ways around pretty much everything. And if you are, say, a judge who wants to be citing a case, there's probably somebody else or wherever Wikipedia took it from that you're probably going to be citing instead.
Back on the point about litigators writing for Wikipedia, I think it's kind of interesting because, most of those people are, well, not all of them, many of them are paid by the hour, and you can't build a write on Wikipedia. So what are they going to do? They're going to give it to somebody in the marketing department to write up a blurb to go on Wikipedia about a case. Then a judge is going to pick that up and run with it, whether it may be right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually not all that easy to just kind of post stuff to Wikipedia. I mean, you have to get sort of accepted as an editor or poster. I forget what the roles are, and go through some kind of a review process, and the posts get reviewed. So there certainly are quality controls, and I think that's one of the things that Wikipedia prides itself on. But it's really more a question of how accurate those kinds of editorial controls can be when you're talking about describing cases.
I have a funny Wikipedia aside. I have a post that I wrote about Law 360 years ago, and it is cited in a Wikipedia write-up about Law 360. They have a footnote to my post, and I went and I looked at it recently, and I was heartbroken. My post is flagged as suspicious content.
That's funny.
Yeah, so it's not that easy. You may get posted, but you may not get cred.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One other thing I thought I'd talk about, just another takeaway from the AALL, was that just a quick note on it, but I wrote about it. The Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, who happened to be the keynote speaker, and gave a good sort of a brief talk, a general talk as her opening, and then sat through a sort of a Q&A chat conversation with the outgoing president of AALL. And then had a question and answer session. In the question and answer session, I happened to ask her about the fact that regulatory reforms in California appear to be stalled. It's something we've talked about a number of times here. A couple of years ago, I think we all thought California might be first out of the gate with enacting a sandbox or a paraprofessional program or something like that. There's been a study committee for a couple of different study committees for a couple of years looking at that issue and coming up with recommendations, but it's all been kind of shut down recently. And I asked her about that, and I thought it was interesting just because, having been speaking for an hour or so at that point, her tone just so dramatically changed when I asked the question, and she seemed to become very defensive. I forget, it might have been Zach or Steve or somebody said to me, well, she just put her lawyer hat on there, but she basically said it's not our fault. My question was, the Supreme Courts of of Utah and Arizona have been leaders in bringing about these reforms. What can the California Supreme Court be doing? And she basically turned around and blamed the legislature, and for good cause. I mean, there is reason to do that, but she really shifted blame away from the Supreme Court. And then apparently later that same day announced her retirement from the court. So I hope it wasn't my article, but Jean was talking about how she's influenced Thomson Reuters a number of times. So I don't know. I hope I didn't get the Supreme Court justice to retire.
I wrote a little bit about it too, Bob, and it was it was kind of a marked. And I sat there listening when you asked the question, and I remember listening to her response, and I remember thinking, it sure sounds like she's trying to pass the buck, whether it's legitimate or not. But boy, no, we have no responsibility whatsoever. It's a damn legislature. After spending almost the better part of an hour talking about we need to work together, we need to be cooperative and collegial and collaborate, but those efforts at the legislature.
And the lawyer lobbyists,
Right.
talked about the
Yes,
lawyer
no, yeah,
lobbyists.
yeah. If she ended up blaming it entirely, they can lobby the legislature.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
So, well, stay tuned for California developments, or not.
Yeah, see
There's
who
a
else
lot
you can
going
drive
on in
out of the
California.
court.
There's a lot going on in California now, though, with their bar association and with that Real Housewives situation, Tom Girardi, and there's like lots of scandals going on related to like him and his the lawsuits and the criminal cases against him, and I wonder if just the fact that that's all just kind of imploding over there may just have stalled a lot of other things too, because you need to have, even though you're talking to the Supreme Court and the legislature, the bar associations have a lot to do with kind of moving those types of initiatives along, and there's just this sort of all over the place right now. I don't know if anyone's been following that.
No, but that's part of the reason for why the state legislature, some legislators have said, you can't even police lawyers. How are you going to police paraprofessionals or alternative legal services providers? That's specifically, they've talked about the Girardi case.
Okay, yeah, I mean, my guilty pleasure whenever I travel is I watch Real Housewives on the plane and the hotel room. Like that's where I catch up on all the stuff. And so when that hit the fan, I just thought it was really interesting because I used to watch it and I'd be like, how does he have that much money? I don't care how successful of a PI attorney he is. There's no way they've got that much money. Like she spent $40,000 a month on like her makeup or something, like just to make it to look good. I'm like, there's no way. So I was not surprised when this whole thing imploded, and it just is having, ramifications over there in California. It's been going on and on and on. And there's always a new headline that deals with the bar association or the prior bar association, not current, people, but it was interesting.
That's a cost of a facelift a month, not makeup.
Right? I mean, it was ridiculous. She has a whole glam team that follows her around and doesn't. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I'm like, $40,000. I don't know a single lawyer that I've ever met that possibly has that much money from practicing law, right? Like I know some pretty successful lawyers. They can't fund that kind of thing legally.
Right. All right. Well, I think that does it for this week. I hope everybody will come back next week for our grand gala going away party for Zach Warren, in which we're all going to drink lots of champagne and talk about the week's top stories in legal tech and innovation.
Make it an interesting one.
Yeah, better.
Actually, the top story next week will be Zach.
I know. Well, hopefully there'll be some other news to talk about next week.
I want to go
We'll
out
see.
with my best giveaway from AALL. It's from Kaleidoscope. It's one of those things you put over your camera to hide, to turn off your camera. I love it.
That's awesome. Good.
All right.
All right. See you all
Bye.
next week. See ya.
So long.
Thanks for listening. Bye.